Today we are going into Prophets and Kings. I just wanted to do a recap because I know there are some new people here. Just a recap on what have we been studying in 2019. And where are we? We are just in the middle of the whole purpose and plan of God. We started with creation, Genesis. We went to Patriarchs. It's also in Genesis, Exodus, about Moses. We went to the conquest. What was the conquest? Joshua, yes, to conquer back Canaan land. And Judges, where we see a lot of degradation of God's people. Remember all the bad judges? Then now we are right in Kings. We've done a couple of Kings already. We're right into Kings, and we still have a long way to go, right? But there's so much that we can learn from the Old Testament. When we learn from the Old Testament, when we go into the New Testament, it will be much easier. When we go into the book of Revelation, it will definitely be much easier. Of course, our plan is, basically God's plan is to restore Eden that was lost. Okay? Restore Eden that was lost. Here we have the eras, and we are down to Kingdom era. We are about to leave Kingdom era to go into the exile era, which is one of the most traumatic time for the Israelites. And then we will go into the return. And very interesting time will be the silence era between the book of Malachi and the book of Matthew. 400 years of silence when God didn't speak to the people. And of course we will go into the gospel era, which is Jesus' time, the church era, from Acts of the Apostles onwards, and the missions era, where we talk a lot about Apostle Paul. And finally, we will reach the book of Revelation in 20. We should finish in 2020, hopefully. As long as you are studying, as long as you're enjoying the lesson, unfortunately, I have to continue. God demands that I continue. Okay, so we are now into the Kingdom era. Anything good about the Kingdom era? Who are some of the good kings? Alright, we started off with definitely David. We started off with David, and then we went down, and it was split between Judah and Israel after the reign of Solomon. How many good kings in Israel? There were 20 kings of Israel. How many good kings? None. Here, none of these were considered good kings. And when we say good kings, what is the definition of a good king? Obedience to God. Alright, it has nothing to do with leadership qualities or anything. Obedience to God. How many good kings were there in Judah? How many? Yes, very good, Amanda. 8 out of 20 kings of Judah means 8 good, 12 bad. So even this is the chosen line of God, yet there was only 8 good kings. Sad, isn't it? Sad, isn't it? How do you think God would feel if this is His chosen people and there were only 8 and some of them were not really even good, isn't it? God did not choose the kings in the first place. God chose Himself. Remember, Saul was not supposed to be the king. Who wanted the king? The people wanted a king. That's why God says, never mind. Let them have a king. But God's first choice was who? Of course, myself. Because why? I know what is good for you guys. But He said, never mind. You want a king? I will choose a good king. A king, not a good king. A king for you. And that is where the whole thing started and ended. So is it God's fault? No. Right? It was the people that chose for the king. But never mind. God says never mind. Alright, I will continue. I chose a good king. I chose David, who wasn't even that good. Then we come down the line. We studied about Jehoshaphat, remember? We studied about him. And last week we studied about the bad king, a bad queen, and after that we studied about Joash. It's going to get worse. There are some good and bad ones. It's going to get worse, and God is going to allow them to be captured and to go into exile. In fact, they were at the point of destruction already. They were at the point of destruction. Israel is earlier. Israel 722 BC already sent to exile by which king? By who? The Assyrians. The Assyrians, 722 or 721, something around there. How about Judah? Which year was Judah sent into exile? 586 or 587 BC, depending on how you want to dig it. So there will be a point in time when God's people will be sent into exile. That means Jerusalem and Israel will be no more. No more. But before that, God sent prophets to warn them. How many books in the Bible have prophet names? Open book quiz, huh? How many books in the Bible have prophet names? As far as the Bible is concerned, we have what we call the major prophets and the minor prophets. These are prophets that in the Bible there are books named after them. Whether they wrote it or not, most of the time likely they wrote it. But theologians are still debating whether or not some of them actually wrote the books, even though the name is there. Major prophets. Can anybody name major prophets? Isaiah, Jeremiah, Daniel. Very clearly, this is Daniel. Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel. So these are considered major prophets. Why? The books are longer. The books are longer. So these are the first four prophets. Where are their books? Their books are after which book? Kingdom era. After 1 King, 2 King, Chronicles and all that. After Psalms. After Proverbs. Am I right? Yeah. All the King's era. Then comes Isaiah. And then after that will come down to Jeremiah. So then you have all the prophets. So in fact, God sent so many prophets to warn Israel and Judah. One of the one you know, quite famous one, the one that contend with King Ahab. Who is that? Elijah. We have Elijah, we have Elisha, but he didn't write books, so they are not there. Okay, there are other prophets as well. Then we have the minor prophets. Whoa, minor prophets, how many? I give you the answer already. How many? 12. So 12 plus 4? 16. Right, 16 that are in the Bible that are named after them. If you go to your Rose book, you will find the era or the timing where these prophets were appointed. Every book of these minor prophets, they will tell you. In the very first verse, they will already tell you when these people were appointed. Hosea, who can I tell me? When was Hosea appointed or under which king? Alright. The other side, Judah. Uzziah. Okay, remember that name Uzziah. Then Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah. Actually, he served under quite a lot of kings. Hosea is well known for what? If you think of Hosea, what will you remember?
He married a prostitute.
Yes, you're right, Uncle Teo. God asked him to marry a prostitute. He didn't marry a prostitute just because of that. God asked him to marry a prostitute. Why?
Adultery of.
To symbolize the adultery of Israel. So God uses these prophets and God uses the events like this to show how bad Israel was. Married a prostitute, had children with her. But it wasn't just to show the weakness of Israel, it was to show the love of God, that he was even willing to marry a prostitute and accept her back. Because later part in the chapters, it says, go, bring back, what's the name of the wife?
Gomer.
Right, thank you, Gomer. Bring her back. Buy her back. In fact, buy her back. This is the story God wanted to reflect to the children of Israel. How bad you are. You are like a prostitute. You are sleeping with all the idols. I'm willing to take you back. Very interesting story. If you have time, go back and read Hosea. He's one of the best minor prophets. And he was appointed during the time of Uzziah, Jotham, that era. How about Joel? Joel, which era? Quick question mark, because the book starts without telling when, which era. How about Amos? Amos is interesting because Amos was never appointed a prophet in the first place. He was a sheep reader and God called him to become a prophet. Obadiah? Don't have? Right, but he was called to warn against Edom, the nation of Edom. And who is the founder of the nation of Edom? Edomites. Who were the father of Edomites? Thank you, Esau. Esau. Eventually they will be destroyed. Then we have Jonah. You all know the story of Jonah? Everybody knows the story of Jonah. What happened to him? He was swallowed by the fish. Micah. Why was he like this? Because he had to preach naked. Not exactly naked, but without his clothes. Means the outer coat. Isaiah had to do that as well. You see what these prophets have to go through? They had to marry prostitute. They are from sheep breeder become a prophet. They had to go through a lot of suffering. Jonah had to be swallowed by the whale or the big fish, and Micah had to preach without clothes. Without clothes. What is Micah known? What prophecy is Micah known for? The town. Micah 5:2. Alright, Bethlehem, Ephrathah. Pastor has gone through that with you guys. Nahum is basically preaching against Nineveh. Habakkuk is known as the complaining prophet. He dares to complain against God. How many of us dare to complain against God? Sometimes we wish to, isn't it? Sometimes we wish to. And these are some of the things that I believe we think about. But Habakkuk, brave enough to voice it out, to complain against God. What did he say? Belle, can you read?
How long, Lord, must I call for help, and you do not listen, or cry out to you about violence, and you do not save? Why do you force me to look at injustice? Why do you tolerate wrongdoing?
Okay, sometimes do we think about that? Why do you make me see iniquity? Why is in the world there's so many bad things happening? Why do you idly look at wrong? There's so many wrong things in the church, in the world. Why are you not doing anything? Any of us ever prayed this to God? Any of us dare to pray this to God? Habakkuk did. Habakkuk did. Alright, continue.
Oppression and violence are right in front of me. Strife is ongoing and conflict escalates. This is why the law is ineffective and justice never emerges. For the wicked restrict the righteous, therefore justice comes out perverted.
So he sees all these things happening in the world. Habakkuk is under which era? Can you all see the rose book? When? It's towards the end of the era already, isn't it? It's towards the end of the era, going into exile already. That means to say bad things are even worse. That's just before going exile. It's just like before Jesus comes the next round, things are going to be worse. So Habakkuk is right there, and he's complaining to God, God, why are you not doing anything? Why are you not showing your hand? Sometimes do we think that way? Don't we think that way? Why? And does God answer him? Of course, God answers him. You can go back and read it. And that's where you come to Habakkuk 2:20. What is that? The Lord is in his holy temple. Let all the earth keep silence. Right, the churches like to use this as in church you must be quiet. But what is it actually talking about? God's judgment. God is saying, shut up, you guys. I am God. That's all. It doesn't mean church you must be quiet. Correct or not? Yes, you must be reverent in the sense that you cannot simply talk, but it doesn't mean that church you must be quiet. It means that, look, quiet, keep quiet, I am God. He's telling Habakkuk, look, I am in control. Because the next verse, he says what? In chapter 1, verse 5. Look among the nations and see, wonder and be astounded, for I'm doing a work in your days that you would not believe if I told you. That means behind the scene, God is working. You may think your life is in such shambles, correct or not? Yeah. Everything is going wrong in your life. And you ask God, God, why is this happening to me? Why am I sick? Why am I poor? Right? Why is my marriage bad? Or why is this? Why is that? Why things are not happening in your life? What is God telling you? Look, I'm working in your days that you will not even believe. I'm doing things in your life that you don't even know what's happening. And that was his answer to Habakkuk, and I really like that. Because sometimes we ourselves question, isn't it, God, why things happen to us? That's exactly what Habakkuk did. Okay, so that's Habakkuk. And then we have Zephaniah, a short one, and Haggai. These two are after the exile. These two, you will see. Correct, not? Haggai, Zechariah, is it after the exile? It's after the exile. Malachi, how about Malachi? Malachi is the last book of the minor prophets. Just before everything goes quiet and then the New Testament starts. It's during after the exile, during the rebuilding of Jerusalem, when the people were holding back things from God. That's why it talks about bring in your tithes into the storehouse.
How do you rob God?
How you rob God, yes. I said, wait, how do we rob God? We come to church we come to church every week. And God says, you rob me by holding back your tithes. Holding back your tithes. Okay, so we have just gone through the minor prophets. You don't have to go back and read already. Sometimes you wonder, does the Bible have these books? For those of you who are new, we can always go through with you, right? I know some of you, if you are new, it might be a little bit confusing to you. But these are the minor prophets and the major prophets that God brought to Israel. You can see it's all during the kingdom era and just a little bit after exile. Means that before the kingdom went into exile, God already warned already. But what happened? They continued to do it. Alright, I want to go now to very important book, which is Isaiah. Which era is Isaiah? Isaiah is during who? Uzziah. The vision of Isaiah, the son of Amos, which he saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem in the days of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, Hezekiah. Isaiah is one of the longest one. How many chapters in Isaiah? 66. We're going to read one of that. 66. Isaiah is apart from the book of Psalms, Isaiah is the most quoted book in the New Testament. Right? In fact, Jesus himself would quote from Isaiah, which later we are going to talk about. 66 books, what is he talking about? Alright, very long, but basically, first chapter to chapter 39 is talking about judgment. It's talking about judgment. Means that God is going to bring judgment to Judah. Chapter 40 onwards is talking about what? God loves so much, but he's angry. So he scold. After he scold, yes, you go to chapter 40. Alright, we go to chapter 40. 40, what does God do?
Comfort my people, says your God. Speak tenderly to Jerusalem, and announce to her that her time of servitude is over. Her iniquity has been pardoned, and she has received from the Lord's hand double for all her sins.
Okay. At chapter 40, God says what? Comfort my people. I want to punish you, yet I love you. So I will bring you back. I will comfort my people. This is one of the oratorio Handel's Messiah, if you know. One of the most beautiful songs comes from here. Comfort my people. Speak tenderly to Jerusalem. Can you imagine if your children are naughty? You scold already, what happened? After that? You sayang back. That's exactly God's relationship with his people. He was so angry with them. He wanted to destroy them. Then his plan was to get Babylon to invade and to bring them into exile. After that, he says, never mind, you stay there. 70 years. I'll bring you back. Isaiah has one of the most verses about the coming Messiah. This one, we've just finished Christmas. Isaiah 7:14. Can you read that, Angela?
Therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son,
and shall call his name Emmanuel.
Wow, we read that all the time. We see that all the time. We hear that all the time. But do we know which book it comes from? Isaiah. That's why I say Isaiah is such an important prophetic book. By the way, what's the meaning of prophet? What is the job of prophet? What is the meaning of prophesying? Is it only seeking the future or talking about the future? It's speaking what God commands you to speak. It's not only, prophesying means you're okay, next year, what's going to happen. It's speaking what God commands them to speak. And the prophets are commanded, sometimes they don't want to speak, but they end up speaking, like Jeremiah. This is one of the future prophecies that he did, is that the Lord himself will give you a sign. Behold, the virgin will conceive. Another one. Wow, this one also is under the oratorio of Handel Messiah. Isaiah 9:6. Isaiah 9:6. Celine, can you read loudly?
For unto us a child is born unto us, a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace.
Referring to who? Referring to Jesus. Now go to verse 7. Go to verse 7. Verse 7 talks about of David's covenant. Of the increase of his government and of peace, there will be no end. On the throne of David and over his kingdom, to establish it and to uphold it with justice and with righteousness from this time forth and forevermore. It's talking about David's covenant. And it's talking about the throne of David and over his kingdom. That means to say the promise he made to David will be fulfilled in Jesus Christ. Furthermore, can you imagine if you were there and Isaiah was telling this to the people, and finally it was so clear. This is the final one. He was so clear.
He was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows, familiar with suffering. Like one from whom men hide their faces, he was despised, and we esteemed him not. Surely he took up our infirmities and carried our sorrows, yet we considered him stricken by God, smitten by him, and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions, he was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was upon him, and by his wounds we are healed.
Is it talking about Jesus?
Yes.
It is talking about Jesus. That's why the Old Testament always points to the New Testament, to the gospel of Jesus. And this is what? Isaiah. Isaiah is how many years before Jesus? How many years? How many years?
700.
700 before Jesus. This was already prophesied. He was pierced for our was he pierced? Yes. He was crushed for our iniquities. Was he crushed? The punishment that was brought us peace was upon him, and by his wounds we are healed. All we like sheep have gone astray. That's the next verse. Right. All the beautiful songs come from the book of Isaiah. This is even more profound because this is exactly what Jesus is going to recite when he went into the synagogue. That's why I say even Jesus recited from the book of Isaiah. And you say that the Old Testament is not important when Jesus himself referred to the Old Testament in the New Testament. Right? You want to go to that in Luke 4:16. Luke 4:16. This is talking about Jesus now in his ministry. And this is one of the first few things that he's doing.
4:16.
Yes.
When he came to the village of Nazareth, his boyhood home, he went as usual to the synagogue on the Sabbath and stood up to read the scripture.
Right. He goes to Nazareth, his boy, where he grew up, and he goes to the synagogue on which day? On the Sabbath day, as was his custom. So Jesus also went to church on a Sabbath day. Of course, yes. Okay, was that Sabbath day and our Sabbath day is the same day? Then we figure it out. But he went to church on a Sabbath day and he stood up to read. It's like Bible reading, alright? He stood up to read
18. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, for he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim that captives will be released, that the blind will see, that the oppressed will be set free. And that time of the Lord's favor has come.
All right, okay, so he went and the scroll of the prophet Isaiah was given to him. Exactly what Rose read just now, is it from here? Yes, exactly, because it is from the scroll of Isaiah. Exactly, the Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is on me because the Lord has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He comes and he reads this from Isaiah 61, verse 1. Now the punchline comes in, verse 20.
He rolled up the scroll, handed it back to the attendant, and sat down. All eyes in the synagogue looked at him intently. Then he began to speak to them. The scripture you've just heard has been fulfilled this very day.
Wow. What does it mean? This, whatever Isaiah is talking about 700 years ago, Jesus just read it and he says this scripture has been fulfilled in your hearing. Means what? Means I am he. He revealed himself to a Samaritan woman, but he would not reveal himself to the Jews. Why?
He knew they will reject him.
Correct. He knew that they would reject him. He knew they would condemn him. He knew that his time of death would come. So he wasn't going to. He just says, today this scripture has been fulfilled in your hearing. So Isaiah itself already prophesied about Jesus 700 years ago. And Jesus used that to reveal himself to those who were able to understand him. So is the book of Isaiah important? It's important. But at that point in time, when he spoke to these people, did they understand? They didn't. Until they went into exile. That's why God allowed them to go in exile so that they can start reading and studying the scriptures again. How did the book of Isaiah end? This is to Isaiah 61 already. So God continued to give them promises and promises. You want to know the ending of the movie, what do? You fast forward to the ending, correct or not? You want to know the ending of a book, what do? You read the last chapter. So you go into Isaiah 66, which is the last book of Isaiah. And what do you read? You see God claiming control. You see God affirming his stand that he is the God Almighty. First verse says what?
My throne.
Heaven is my throne and the earth is my footstool. That means to say, I am the Almighty. The earth is just for me to step on. Final judgment. We go to verse 15. Now, if you don't have time, you go to the ending of the chapter. Then you will see what Isaiah is prophesying.
15. See, the Lord is coming with fire, and his swift chariots roar like a whirlwind. He will bring punishment with the fury of his anger and the flaming fire of his hot rebuke. The Lord will punish the world by fire and by his sword. He will judge the earth, and many will be killed by him.
Okay, many will be killed by him. That means the last judgment is coming. The last judgment, and now you are not seeing Jesus as a lamb that was slain. You are going to see Jesus as the mighty conqueror. And we are going to see that again in the book of Revelation. In this last book and this last chapter of Isaiah is talking about the conquering king. It's talking about one that is no longer of mercy already, of judgment. So if it was that judgment day, whose side do you want to be on? The conquering side or the losing side? This is something that we have to ascertain with. This is something that the Israelites had to ascertain with at that point in time. And it goes on further to talk about verse 17.
Those who consecrate and purify themselves in a sacred garden with its idol in the center, feasting on pork and rats and other detestable meats, will come to a terrible end, says the Lord.
Oh my goodness. Alright, here also it talks about those that sanctify and purify themselves, right? Not through God. And those that are eating pig's flesh and the abomination and mice. So it does associate pig with mice. Strangely here, shall come to an end together, declares the Lord. And then continue.
18. I can see what they are doing and I know what they are thinking. So I will gather all nations and peoples together and they will see my glory.
Okay, so he's going to gather his people together. He's going to, of course, we look at the judgment side, but he says, I know their works and their thoughts, and the time is coming to gather all nations and tongues. So is it only going to be Israel that is going to be gathered? It will be saying all nations and tongues, and they shall come and see my glory. I'm coming, I'm coming, I'm coming in glory. I'm not coming born in a stable. I'm coming in glory. So you prepare for it. And then it goes on and on. I want you to go to verse 22.
As surely as my new heavens and earth will remain, so will you always be my people with a name that will never disappear, says the
Okay,
Lord.
all right. So it says, as the new heavens and the new earth that I make. This same verse is going to be in Revelation. Right? This same verse. As the new heavens and the new earth I make means what? Means this earth? No more. I'm going to create the new earth. I'm going to create Eden again. Just like what I was talking about with my first slide. It's from Eden to Eden. I'm going to restore Eden. Shall remain, and so shall your offspring and your name remain. Means that those that have his name will remain. After that, 23.
All humanity will come to worship me from week to week and from month to month. And as they go out, they will see the dead bodies of those who have rebelled against me, for the worms that devour them will never die, and the fire that burns them will never go out. All who pass by will view them with utter horror.
Okay, so not such a good scene at the end, but verse 23, from new moon to new moon, and actually in the Hebrew is from Sabbath to Sabbath. Your version is already watered down, right? It's from Sabbath to Sabbath. How many of your versions have Sabbath to Sabbath? Yes. Most versions have Sabbath to Sabbath, which is, the Hebrew has Sabbath to Sabbath. All flesh shall come before me, declares the Lord. So again, there's mention about the Sabbath here. All flesh shall come worship before me, says the Lord. So the judgment call comes in to us as well. Any warning signs for us today? Right. What are the signs today? Where can we find the signs? Matthew? Okay, Matthew 24. You will see Jesus telling his disciples, because when his disciples say, when will the end come? And Jesus starts telling them all that. And what is the last verse of that chapter?
You cut him to pieces and assign him a place with the hypocrites. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth.
Exactly something like what Isaiah is talking about, the last verse. So there will be judgment, there will be end for the evil ones, the wicked ones. Right? It's where we choose our destiny. So exactly what Isaiah is doing. He was prophesying to the people at that time. He was telling the people, warning the people. Right? So perhaps our time is we have to be like Isaiah to go and talk and tell the people what's going to happen to the world. Will you do that or not? Will you be a prophet for God or not? That's a question that we have to ask. If we want to save our family, we want to save our friends, we want to save our loved ones, perhaps we have to be brave like these prophets. There were many, many other prophets as well who lay down their lives for God. Are we willing to do that? That's the question I have for you today.